All right, so let's just bring them on. Welcome, Jamie Kiley. What's up, buddy?
What's going on, Joe? Good to see you.
Yeah, well, it looks like you're in a much better place than I am.
Yeah, surprise. I'm in Hawaii.
I can hear the trade winds blowing as they're hitting the mic. I see the palm trees in the back.
Yeah, it's a pretty beautiful place. Not just in Hawaii, but I am on or in the proximity of Love Island.
Oh, all right. Well, let's start right there. I mean, basically, what this show is people on location doing what they do. Tracking you is worse than tracking in an Apollo mission because every time I turn around, you're someplace else. So let's start with obviously you're in Hawaii, near Love Island, on Love Island. What are you doing? What's up?
I can tell you, on or near, I'm not quite sure, but what I'm doing, I'm actually here helping as a part of the director team producing the CBS show Love Island. It's a reality show where they have a series of contestants who are coupled up. I won't explain the whole content of the show. It's something you can check out on CBS, but technically, we're kind of looking in on their lives as they live and go through these different competition series and very real world-ish, but I think real world 20 years later.
That's kind of crazy because knowing the real world back from the day and the beach when I was playing in those worlds, you roll a lot. I mean, you're on pretty much 24/7. It just keeps going.
Right now, while we're talking, they're downstairs. The director team is on the air to some degree. They're taking all the feeds and they're kind of recompositing them for what you see on TV when it airs on CBS, which I believe tomorrow it's either tomorrow or the next day is a primetime special for the finale of Love Island, which is really exciting for the team here who have been here since June 6th. So this show has had the production team in location on place for about 2 months. I, fortunately for myself, was able to become involved, but also not, spend all that time. I give a lot of respect and credit to the people who have, but I came on sort of late in the process, kind of to help push it across the finish line.
Wait a minute, wait a minute. You're telling me, oh, the grind of being in Hawaii for a month, oh, 2 months. Oh my God, that's so
Yeah, yeah.
hard.
It's funny. I to tell people that it seems ridiculous, and I even as I'm saying it, it sounds pretentious. But the guys are doing 12-hour days. Right now I'm
Oh,
still my head's on East Coast time, so I'm waking up early, and I don't actually get into work right now as we're talking. It's I don't want to timestamp this, but it's early in the morning in Hawaii. It's your late afternoon. I
right.
go in to help the director unit relieve in the late afternoon, so about 6 hours from now I'll be doing that, and I'll be staying up until the Islanders wake up in the morning. So we follow them through the night. There's cameras on them sleeping. They're the whole nine. So it is a long day for the director unit. They're rotating, so I can't say it's super grueling. And of course, I get to eat breakfast in places like this, so it's nice. But it is a series of breakfasts and transfers and a lot of control. The control room that I'm in here on Love Island looks a lot like the control room in New York.
Oh, really?
Yeah, yeah. I'm in a dark room with a lot of monitors. When we're actually getting down to work, that's where I spend 12 hours.
Nice. Yeah, that's not. Basically, this could be Hawaii right now as far as your
Yeah.
your work environment.
Absolutely. And
So,
funny enough, the whole streaming world of things has made it so often I will be doing that, right? I'm in Hawaii right now, but since I've been here, I've actually done shows in New York.
so great segue. Thank you. And we didn't script any of this, but that's a great segue. So, you and I go back a long time, but tracking you in the last year and a half, 2 years almost, it's you've been big virtual, then big reality, then big virtual, then big reality, then virtual and reality, and then you've been so kind of layer some of that and give. Let's go from where you are in Hawaii back up one gig and tell me where that was and what that was about.
So before Love Island, before I came out here for this production, I was doing the Olympics with NBC, but I was doing that remotely from Stamford, Connecticut. It's funny. I was on the plane here, and I came basically butt to butt, like from gig to gig. I finished the Olympics. I got on a plane, flew to Hawaii. I was still wearing my NBC shirt just out of lack of laundry, And it says NBC Tokyo, and people, especially a New York to LAX flight where I had my layover to get to Hawaii. There's a
Right.
lot of production people on those flights, so everyone's like, "Hey, were you in Tokyo?" I was like, "No, I was in Connecticut doing the Olympics." It's like, "Yeah, I was doing the Olympics." Oh, how was Tokyo? I couldn't tell you. I was in Connecticut. So we were in Connecticut. That director unit was receiving all the feeds from Tokyo, much of which is now composited, and what you see on air for NBC during the Olympics coverage is actually happening in Connecticut. They're capturing all the video and audio from the event, all the coverage, sending it back to Connecticut, mixing the effects, cutting the cameras, and doing a lot of the heavy lifting in their NBC Sports facility in Stamford.
Now, because a lot of the Olympics weren't live, and that's not a secret, because of you're looking at 13-hour shift in broadcast time. So how much of that got taken in and then was posted, or was it just all the feeds taken in and then just cut cameras and it goes out as if it would have been live?
They're doing a lot of as live stuff. I mean, they're looking for those big moments that you're going to see on their sports desk show that Rich Eisen was hosting from NBC.
Right.
So you see the big moments and those things. They're being composited for a sports desk environment. But the actual ingestion of what you see as coverage, they're doing most of that as live. So the trucks are busy. They're treating it like a live production, even though it's going to air. It's essentially slipped. So it's going to air the next day when regular U.S. time zone people are up and about and living their lives and watching normal TV. But you could see some programming on Peacock and certain channels that were featuring certain events in the middle of the night.
Yeah, I understood. That's what I mean. Following it, obviously, we have a lot of friends that are out there doing that, and the streams were almost, pick an event and you could go on a stream and watch that, which is people are accustomed to it, but it's really mind blowing. I mean, it's so cutting edge right now, and there's such a shift in the industry, which is what I want to talk to you a lot about. So you were on the forefront and still are in the shift. You had a very extreme career, a very elaborate career prior to. You were gig to gig, a lot of big gigs, a lot of movement around. You flew all over the place. And then 2020 hit.
Yeah.
And everybody just stopped working. And there just
Yeah.
wasn't anything anywhere. And it was a scramble to find, what do we do? Networks
Yeah.
can't go off the air.
Yeah,
So,
it's scary.
Talk a little bit
Scary
about
time.
how you and your crew and the people started pioneering a lot of what became traditional and still is now.
Sure, yeah. So it was I look back on it. I mean, it's crazy to think what a year and a half has brought us, but all of our lives have been so extremely disrupted, and we've all moved into a different direction. That I look at it as a big pivot, and I was fortunate enough that I had a great network of people around me that we were able to pivot together and kind of innovate a lot of these technologies. But to give you this quick story, going back to 2020, March of 2020, I was booked through the summer, right? Like everybody that we work with, I had events, productions, straight through the summer that I was looking forward to as my regular income. Being a freelancer, once all of that gets paused and canceled, you got to be concerned, like, where's my next paycheck coming from? And fortunately, a lot of the networks I was booked with, they did pay out through a month and a half or whatever you were booked on through May 1st. But I went from very busy to a hard stop. I picked up a couple of quick weeks doing some emergency news coverage for CBS. Fortunately, some of our mutual friends had connected me with people where they actually taken CBS News, which, if anyone recalls, they had found COVID early on in the 57th broadcast
Right.
center at CBS.
Right.
So CBS was one of the first facilities to close, but the news is an essential service. So they moved that news environment and the news desk up to Stamford, Connecticut, where the Yes Network is, and they produced 2 weeks, from what I was involved with, of regular news. And that was when the news was really important in our lives. It was crazy.
Yeah.
That was the first.
Yeah.
That was the first checkpoint in a long series of events that got me into where I am now with the streaming production business. But that, at the time, I happened to meet the Venn diagram of work at CBS and had worked at the Yes Network. So fortunately, my name was on 2 payroll lists, and it made me an easy hire. So I did that for 2 weeks. But again, we think about where we are now. We've come to live with the COVID environment, but at the time, mean, my wife was seriously concerned every time I left the apartment. She's like, why are you doing this? Why are you going to work up in Connecticut and drive? And I had the essential worker papers, and it's funny. I mean, well, I shouldn't say funny. It's interesting to be doing what I'm doing, right? Television, and be considered essential when so many of my brother, who's a nurse, doing frontline healthcare work. I have the same paperwork, and I'm going to work in a television studio at the Yes Network. And this is, this is pre-mask, before we had masks. It was very early on. It was scary, and the news was terrifying. I'm going. Not only am I going to work during this time, but what I'm watching all day is, the world falling apart. So that was crazy. When that ended, though, when the 2-week stretch was over, and I got back to my apartment, which I lived on 43rd and 11th in Manhattan, I overlooked the Javits Center and the Lincoln Tunnel. And I used to look out the Lincoln Tunnel when I'd come out to Jersey to do some of the work we do together. I would gauge the traffic by having my morning coffee and looking out. Now, no cars all day. I really wish I would have done a time lapse because I had the perfect spot for it. I didn't have the equipment in the apartment at the time, but every day I'd wake up and it was crazy, right? I mean, to really timestamp it, this is when Cuomo used to go on TV every day and talk about the updates. So if you want to think about that, where we were, and then the ambulances going back and forth to the Javits Center, all the concern and panic, and no work. I had nothing going on at that point. I was extremely fortunate. Someone reached out to me and asked me if I could help out with this, basically esports tennis tournament. They had basically commissioned it was called the Mario Grand Slam. So they repurposed a real in-life tennis tournament and made it a virtual experience. And I got to work with the people behind EA Sports and all of their gaming productions, and some really great engineers who were trying to branch into the space of building at-home kits, and all this is before we had all these at-home kits. Now, like you and I can talk and have a fairly high-level production right here. I'm in Hawaii, you're back east. But at the time, getting in-home equipment, internet access, whatever it be, like the actual bandwidth you needed back and forth to create that was a big deal, and it wasn't a known entity. So I had partnered up with a good friend of mine, Michael Sanasari, who is one of the best technical directors, in my opinion, in the business. And we started working with these EA Sports engineers. This show that we did was an Endeavor production, which is part of the William Morris family, and it was a big. It was airing on Facebook, so we were in touch with the Facebook engineers, and with that team, we were able to basically engineer and pull off a broadcast at a pretty high level. One of the guys who was involved that I work with, he hosted us at his home in Bedford Hills, New York, in the Westchester area. We went over to his place, and that's when we really hammered it out. We were on calls and meetings, and there was really no promise that we were actually going to figure it out at the time. It was like, hey, this is all very fresh. We're working with some of the best people, but every little nuance of things that are now understood, at the time they weren't. So the software for the production that we were using, the comm systems, we were working things out of scale, out of scope. Like there are some pretty commonly used apps by gamers that weren't used in broadcast. Things like Discord, like those types of things that now we're all starting to use in broadcast. But it wasn't professional. It was almost like I had to consult 13 and 14-year-old gamers as to what the best technologies were that I could use to bring in some of these broadcast feeds and comm systems. And we did it. We were able to pull off a pretty good production. That was a one-off, and it gave me something to work on. But while I was working on that production, we were also working as a team to build something sustainable in case this was going to be prolonged, which it was. So, I was fortunate to be in that position. And we teamed up with a now good friend, Jeff Butler, who had illustrious career in broadcast sports, and he had been working with EA Sports for years leading into this. So myself and Jeff and Michael, we created an entity, Blind Squirrel, that was just focused on streaming production and really the technology behind it. Not we had there was a need. People were reaching out like left and right, like that. The team that pulled off that Mario Grand Slam event, which had, going back to that, it was a celebrity celebrity tournament where they paired up a celebrity with a tennis player. So you had big names, Venus Williams, Serena Williams. Who else was on that? Haley Bieber. There was all these. John McEnroe was the host. So it was big names doing this production, and then that unit started finding more of those types of productions to work within. So we immediately had a technology need. They had a technology need, and we had a solution. So we built out this system, and we've been doing it ever since.
You hit on so many things that I just want to briefly, A, clarify for people, and B, almost snicker at it. When you said Facebook is broadcasting this, you said that so casually. These are things that didn't, and EA Sports was, that if you go back 2 months before that, none of this would have made sense. I mean, those of us deep in the industry, especially on the tech side, something's coming. We project it, it's going to happen. Remote's going to happen. The internet's going to come up. IP is going to become a thing. And but you're looking at 10 years. You go to trade shows and there's some gear that kind of fluffed around. And the gaming industry really had a handle on all of this because they've been doing this for 20 years. They've been at this. But everybody kind of poo-pooed that as the gaming industry. That's like the off-Broadway show. It doesn't count. And then all of a sudden, as you described, they came right to the forefront. So you were saying a lot of things. And I mean, right now, we haven't even gone back in your career. So let's just recap some of that, because where you are now, it's very interesting to me that you were able to, we'll steal the word from Silicon Valley. You pivoted really well. And that pivot, we all got forced into finding ways to make money. That was the driving force behind everything. And the networks had to stay on air. In some of these other interviews, I dealt with a lot of the lighting directors who had to do heavy hitter anchors for these big news hosts, but they had to go to their house. And as you said, recall where we were in a time and place. You couldn't. So it wasn't like a crew could come into a location. One guy. And I heard stories about they just shipped boxes of gear. And you get talent who had to open it up.
Explain to John McEnroe how to plug a USB into his microphone and how to set up his headphones, and then go into his Chrome browser and reconfigure his settings. Like at that time, doing that to John McEnroe, it was a feat in itself. That was its own skill set.
Yeah, and then you also had networks who were accepting things, images and audio and boxes that they would have never even considered. There was no way not half, I would say 90% of what went on the air in the first 2 months would have ever made air in any place. People would have been fired left and right if they tried to push that out.
Dropouts in audio, like the entire production freezing. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of early bumps on the road.
I'm older than you, but those of anybody who's listening who's at that age, it was like Max Headroom became the standard for everything. And if you don't know who Max Headroom is, go Google it up, because it is what the industry was for about a year. So again, let's quickly tell me about how you came up. Again, we came up shoulder to shoulder, so I do know all the answers. But just give the audience a sense of where you were going when everything changed, what you had built. Don't go back to the beginning, when you went to the high school dance. Let's start from when you actually started working.
So fairly fortunate to have built some background in career working camera and being on sets, all of which you're well aware of, having seen the actual genesis of all of it for me personally. Mm-hmm. If I want to pick it up at directing, I had been fortunate again with work that we worked on together to have the opportunity to get in the director's chair and call cameras. I think it helped that I had a background in camera, so I knew placement of cameras, I knew lens depth and things like that.
Big point.
Very
Big
helpful.
point.
Yeah, and that's something that I don't think I would be successful in where I am if I didn't come from that background. Because you do see directors who don't have that background, who come from the content side, and I wish them well, but I think it's difficult. It's a hard thing to transition. So I'd worked my way into doing some cable sports stuff. I was directing some cable sports desk type shows, a couple of events, and I got the opportunity to become a part of the American Ninja Warrior team. Which was, at the time, a pretty big show. In fact, when it was first offered for me to become involved with the director unit on that show, I turned it down because I was intimidated by it. It's a big set, and I had a lot of work, and I was kind of comfortable in this, local sports coverage, cable sports network type of environment. But then I had a push from another, great friend in production and someone who I also considered a mentor, much like yourself, Patrick McManus, who was the head director for that unit. And he basically just said, hey man, come out and do this. And if it's not for you, whatever, leave. I mean, I was a freelancer, right? So what's the worst that could happen? I get in the chair and I don't have it, or I don't like it, or it's, not my cup of tea. So I did. And then that branched into this whole world of sports competition reality, because that show kind of bridged several different types of formats. I'd been used to covering sports, and that show has a sports element of the contestants, the ninjas, running through this course, and then it had a reality aspect because you're covering storylines and friends and family on the sideline and people cheering them along. I also came in at a very fortunate point where the show had been set up, so I'm kind of just sliding into a template, a show that's already been built. And I have a great deal of respect for all the people who got it to where it is. I mean, to become a part of a show at that level that's already a big success is helpful. I learned a ton, sitting next to Patrick and some of the other producers and directors who were involved in that unit. And so then when these other shows started to come along, some of them had very similar kind of formats and templates. I was able to utilize my knowledge and skills that I'd learned on that production to do similar productions like Ultimate Beastmaster, which was the Netflix show, right. $1 Million Mile was a CBS show. They all had that reality competition kind of a format.
Yeah. So I mean, again, you're dabbling in areas that I want to really spend time in, which we don't have. But you talked about mentorship. You talked about community, and you talked about the third element, which is you got to take a shot.
Yeah.
You may not be ready, but you may not think you're ready, but you got to take a shot.
Yeah, so, I was fortunate to have the opportunity, and then I took the shot.
Right. But again, you walked away from it in the first blush thinking, I don't know. Yeah. But if you don't step out, you're really never going to see what you're capable of.
And that was a big thing for me, that moment, realizing that, because then after that happened, I started stepping out on everything. Everything that someone would pitch me something, and I felt like because of my experience with that specific production, I could step into anything. And then you also start to meet people in different parts of the world, and you realize I'm just as capable as any of these other people. I may not have the experience or the frame of reference, but I'm going to be a hard worker, and I'm going to show up early on set. And I'm going to learn. I would do things like open up tech manuals and figure out pieces of equipment that were on the set that I have nothing to do with. But it would just be helpful to know how they worked, so I knew what I could do with them and how to communicate to the operators of those pieces of equipment.
Big, right there. That's a big thing. And you started saying it because you came up as a camera person, which, by the way, I can attest to. You're a very good camera person, and you spent a lot of time teaching as the interns and newbies were coming up. And I can always tell that if you can teach, that means you actually know stuff. If you can, well, let me rephrase it. If you can teach and they learn, then you know stuff. A lot of people teach, but nobody learns anything. So what you were just saying was learn a lot, because you have all these different operators that you have to interface with. And if you don't understand their position, you don't have to do it, but you have to have an appreciation of it.
Yeah,
You agree? Because if you
absolutely.
don't, you're going to
Well,
over ask or
the other
under
thing
ask.
too is when you're a lead director, you're more than just sitting in a chair and calling cameras. You're a leader of a team, and it's
Right.
important that you understand some of the capabilities and the even down to the personalities of the team members that you're working with. But I think that when I learned that, and I learned it from fortunately some people I consider great team leaders, yourself included, at an early age, like
Thank you.
looking at the nuances of how you and some of the other people I've been fortunate enough to work with lead a team, you say to yourself, okay, well, I need to understand what these people are doing, or else I can't be an effective leader.
Correct. Correct. Yeah, absolutely. It's a 100% part of our culture, and that's what does separate. You're going to get to a point where you're going to hit a ceiling if you don't know how to do that when you're in those positions.
Yeah.
And something else, which is going to sound really strange, is you have to be able to push back when other people are telling you stuff that you know is wrong and
Yeah.
it's going to hurt the project.
Yeah.
And a lot of those are executive producers, senior
Oh yeah.
producers,
Yeah,
and
and you know what? Talking about being a young director and getting into some productions that feel a little over your head at first, it's hard to find that voice. You have to find
yes,
your confidence to say, wait a second, like, I'm not just sitting in a chair, rolling through the motions, reading a script. I'm an
right,
active participant and a leader of this team. When something doesn't feel right, it's probably because someone who's on the other side, on the production side or the content side, doesn't understand what I understand. And then when you find that middle ground and the value that you're adding, and you can interject appropriately and respectfully, then
right.
that's when you really start to make sense of it all. And that's what I think was I was fortunate to have that, and some of that came from funny enough, my business background as a tour business owner and operator. You take these lessons from understanding other things in previous experience and understanding that they apply to production. Like, just because there are big lights, a big set, and a lot of people listening to what you're saying, and there's a lot of money being thrown around, doesn't mean that the basic principles of communication, interpersonal skills, and leading a team don't apply. In fact, they're even more important than ever when you're working at that
Oh,
level.
absolutely. Yeah, and you're in an industry of cynicism. Most people assume. I would say most in our industry, when somebody new walks into a leadership position, the assumption is you're an idiot. You don't know what you're talking about. Don't tell me how to do my job. And that's not just the New York thing. That's a thing globally. That's how the industry runs. So you have to earn your stripes. You have to come in, and you have to all of what you just said. You have to socially, politically, you have to establish yourself without offending or without crossing swords with people. So, okay, so we talked about the virtual, we talked about reality. Now I want to talk about when you combine these two, because we've talked and
Yeah.
you've been in a control room doing real stuff, and then go, okay, I'm doing a virtual thing. While that's on commercial, I'm going to go over here
Yeah.
until we come back, and then I'm going to come back over here.
Well,
How the F do you do that?
I will say, I think that one of the things I honed in on early in the virtual space was my trying to effectively use my undiagnosed ADD to be able to multitask. And this is like funny when you get in touch with, like, everyone has their own strengths and weaknesses. When you get in touch with your strengths and you realize, like, I can look at a lot of things at once and prioritize, like, where those things need to be. I've now been on air with two different productions at the same time, and a lot of that had to do with the need for this virtual production, where there's so much need that you would get concessions from certain clients where they'd say, hey, look, I can do the show. I was like, but look, in the middle of the show, I have to, do a 5-minute stream for this other thing that I'm working on. Is that okay? And they would just go, yeah, we need your help. Yeah, whatever you said, sure, do that thing. We need your assistance on our thing. So we will concede that you will be working on something else at the same time, and working two different comm systems perhaps at the same time. And the virtual, one of the things that's allowed me the freedom to be in Hawaii, I had some commitments when this opportunity was offered to me, and if those commitments had been physical production that I had to be at a location, I wouldn't have been able to take this up and be out here. But because the shows that I was working on, before this commitment were virtual, I did 2 shows from the hotel room since I've been here working on this show, because those things are in the virtual space. So as long as I have internet, I can be sent to multi-view. I can get on my comms on my phone and essentially operate a high-level production in the cloud.
And essentially operate a high-level production in the cloud that you pioneered with your crew.
Yes.
Because it wasn't there. It wasn't like,
Yeah, correct.
here's the thing, get the manual out, and I'm going to learn to do this. This was like,
it was a lot of trial and error, a lot of thought and engineering. I have to really give almost all of the credit to my partners with Blind Squirrel, Jeff, and I got to stop calling him Michael because he goes by Spider. So let me just call him Spider. Jeff and Spider.
You know, it's funny. You said Michael like 3 times, and I didn't know who you were talking about.
I've called him Michael because it's on his email, but it's Spider, so I might as well call him Spider.
Right.
I really leaning on those guys for the help. I mean, I certainly played my part, but I feel like I was more of I was learning as much as I was building, and out of a need, and also a deep respect for what we were doing. I saw it as the future of where this was going, and I said to myself, how can I use my skill sets to help project manage this along, to help learn the technologies, to help find a role. And that's when I realized, became more of the director than the technical director, where I was like, okay, well, I understand the technical and I understand the builds of this and I can help that, but now I need to bring in a team and scale this. So I would direct and bring in some trusted guys like Colin Wheeler and Redmond Hill and some of the other guys who we've worked with, Mark Vegas, these guys, to help work in those technical positions, and I could oversee these projects so we could grow together as a unit.
Yeah, and it's happening. I mean, I've watched this over my career for way too long, but I've watched new technology come in that was very raw, very engineering, very hard to put the pieces together, and you really had to have your tech head on in order to even figure out how to use it. And then as it refines, it becomes more and more boom, push this button, boom, push this button. And then operators come in from everywhere because now it's nothing to use. And it's really just that. So I got to cut us off soon, but I want to punctuate one thing with you. When you were talking about managing your ADD and, being able to multitask and go through all of this other stuff, that all became okay during the 2020 need. Prior to that, and you and I have worked together a lot, and Jamie, and the way control rooms are set up, there's a front row, there's a back row, and then there's a back row, and usually directors, that whole front row are the hands-on operators. Then the next row behind them are all of the producers who are kind of trying to fit everything together. Then there's the back row, which are the elite. They're calling the shots. They put up the money, and I can't tell you how many times, because I know you can. Jamie would be at the control at his switcher doing what he's doing, and then look over and his laptop's open and he's checking out an email, and then not missing a beat.
Yeah.
But I'm like, these guys behind me are not getting that. You're capable of doing that.
It's a generational thing almost.
Absolutely, 100%.
Well, it's like, think about the overexposure that people younger than me, but even when I go back to media and its involvement in my life, the reason why I was interested in it, and the constant ability to be engaged in all of these different places, it's like reading all of the billboards in Times Square at once. Where you look at the street and you see it all. I think that's really helped me as a director, but as a person who's just sitting there focusing on a single task, it was almost like if I wasn't engaging myself with at least one other thing, I would actually become distracted. When you stare at one camera and I'm like, okay, I'm looking at this camera, I'm looking at this camera, I'm looking at this camera. If I don't involve my mind or engage it, I'm actually going to just be staring into space and I'm not actually paying attention. Whereas by having one side thing, it actually helped me focus on the projects. It's really interesting when I think about it. Now I've been able to analyze it because of what we had to do during COVID.
Yes, great analogy and great point. Because that is, we're cut from the same disabilities.
Yeah.
Disabilities in a different world, assets in this world. Crazy. That's why I can function so well in a live environment, is because I can look at the director, I can look at the graphics, I can listen to audio, I can talk to the remotes, I can watch everything simultaneously. And you just said that perfectly. If I only had to focus on one thing, I would be thinking about my drive home. I would think about going down the shore. I would think about, I got to go home, fix my bike, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. So, yeah, great. Jamie, thanks for taking the time. There's so much more I want to talk to you about. And since the show's on location and you're always on location, you're going to come back multiple times.
Yeah, next time I'll have better front light, not so much backlight. I was trying to showcase the beautiful Hawaiian background and neglect the face.
And when we were coming on, that was the ironic part of this. Mr. King of Virtual, he's on a cell phone, he's got bad lighting. I was like, this is great. And we couldn't get online. We were having problems. First time ever in this show that I had a problem getting a guest on.
I think it was pumping the brakes so I could respect the process.
All right, Jamie, thanks for taking the time with us.
All right, thanks.
Enjoy Hawaii.
Will do.
Bye-bye.